Okay, so Johnny, thank you for talking to us. And I want to know what is ethno theater or an ethno drama, and what is its relationship to documentary theater?
Okay. Ethnodrama refers to the written script, and ethnotheater refers to the theatrical production of that script. So its relationship to documentary theater is very close. Documentary theater tries to put on stage life as it happens in the real world. But ethnodrama and ethnotheater, notice that the first part of those terms is ethno, referring to ethnography or the study of a culture or a group of people. And what ethnotheater and ethnodrama try to do is to give real life a little bit of artistic and aesthetic shape so that when we put it on the stage, we're not seeing life unedited. We're making very careful selections about what parts go on stage, what pieces go in film, so that way we give our audiences a kind of artistic rendering of real life. So that for me is the way I would define the terms.
So it's a matter of different focus, am I right?
There are lots of different forms of what I call ethnodrama and ethnotheater. There's something called conversational dramatism, which is where you take exactly the way people speak and exactly what they say, and you put it, on stage. Other people call that exact same thing verbatim theater. There is inquiry-based theater, where you're using theater to investigate or explore a real problem. So you put the problem the way it really happens on stage, and then afterwards you ask your audience, how do we solve this problem? So there are lots of different variations of it. For me, I just simply use ethnodrama and ethnotheater as the big umbrella that covers all those different terms and different approaches.
And I read your book and introduction. You even you gave a list of more than 80 terms there.
Yeah, and since that book's written, I've found more. There are over 100 terms now. Reality-based theater, investigative theater, theater of the real, nonfiction playwriting, so many different labels for what is kind of the same thing.
Okay, so my next question is, what's the difference of this kind of theater to the conventional drama that's based on history? Sometimes when we see a film, the first flip is based on a true story. So it also comes from the writer will also study or research that particular issue or that particular event. So what's the difference?
Well, you used a very important phrase. You said, based on a true story. And sometimes when we see that in a film or in a theater program, that doesn't necessarily mean that what we're seeing is the truth or the way it actually happened. We're seeing an adaptation. Obviously, for something that happened in history centuries ago, unless you have written records of what people actually said, there's no way we really know the way things happened. So that would be based on a true story. And regular conventional theater most often can be fictional stories, things that are created by the playwright or by the company, that is just a wonderful imaginative news story. But documentary theater, ethnotheater, relies on taking what people actually say, what they've written, the way they interact in daily life, and it's being selective about the actual things that we see in everyday life and putting them on stage. So that in documentary theater, we have the ability to record and have actors actually say what people said in real life. And that for me is the primary difference between conventional theater and documentary theater.
Can you give me some concrete examples, like or your most memorable examples of yourself or a work you have seen?
We talked earlier about how every artist is proud of a work that they created. And for me, the one ethno-theater production I've done that I'm most proud of was a play called Street Rat. A colleague of mine interviewed homeless teenagers who lived in New Orleans in the United States. And what she did was she listened to the stories of these young people. And her son, oddly enough, also was homeless for a while, and he also knew these young people. He wrote poetry about young people and about living homeless. And they documented their research as poetry, as short stories, as small readers' theater pieces. But all these different pieces never really came together into one finished product. And I was so excited by all the material that they did, I asked for their permission to adapt everything that they had written and put it into a final play form. And what I did was I wove a story about the young man who did have a drug problem. And that for me was the central story throughout the entire play. I also wove in the son's poetry, because what he would do is he would stand on the streets telling and shouting out his poetry, and people would donate money, for hearing the poetry. So I brought those two primary things together in the play. And what it dealt with was homeless people who, in a way, want to go back home, but they can't. Homeless people who have to deal with drugs, with alcohol, and they don't have a way out. So I did it with young people who actually researched what it was like to be homeless. They talked to homeless youth. They even slept outdoors for one night to learn for themselves, these actors, what it was like to be homeless. And they brought that knowledge with them into the performance. Because we did the play in Arizona, but the setting of the play was in New Orleans, I had friends in New Orleans, and I told them, send me things that are actually from New Orleans, send me trash. And so they sent me actual trash of things that you would find in that part of the country, and we put it all over the stage and all over the auditorium where people sat. Because when I went to New Orleans and I interviewed homeless people, they told me that if you came to where homeless kids stay, there would be a lot of trash all over the floors. So we tried to create as authentically as we could what it was like to live as a homeless person. That is the work that I'm probably the most proud of, because we captured real life as much as we could. We made it as authentic as we could. And the things that the actors said were things that these young people actually said in the interviews. Yeah.
So, but as you also said in the book, there can be bad ethno theater works because you label your work as documentary theater or ethno theater. It doesn't mean that you will be good automatically. So, what do you think is the trick or the pitfalls that we should be aware of if we want to do a ethno theater, whether it's ethno theater or ethno drama or documentary theater works?
The very first two ethno theater pieces I did, I learned a very important lesson. If you are too real, if you say things on stage without trimming them, without editing them, without being very selective, it can be very boring. And so what I learned was that you really have to be careful in what pieces of real life you select to put on the stage. There's nothing wrong with slightly rewriting what somebody said, as long as you maintain the same spirit. But maybe if they said something that takes 3 sentences and you just want to make it 1 sentence long, that's fine, so long as you stay, true to the person who said it. Because if you put real life on stage exactly the way it happens, that doesn't really engage the audience very much. Theater relies on an economy of time. We have to tell our stories in just a limited parameter of just a few hours at most. And so we have to be very careful with our playwriting. We still need to develop a very good story. We need to have something that shows characters facing some kind of problem. Just the same principles we apply for playwriting of a fictional piece, we also have to apply for playwriting of a real life piece. So the art still must be there. I tell scholars who don't have a theater background, who try to do a play, sometimes they try to write it like a journal article. They will put in so much intellectual language and scholarly research, and I want to say, no. We don't do that in regular plays, and we shouldn't do that in ethno theater either. Ethno theater is not a research article. Ethno theater should be good drama. And so I'm always telling people who don't have a theater background, you need to learn what makes for good art, not good research,
When I was in Vancouver, I attended a symposium. There was a presentation, and the presentation was done by a group of students in social work, I think, and led by a lecturer in social work. And the presentation is about, but they have read a lot of transcripts about, I don't know whether this phenomenon is called residential schools in Canada, and you can imagine a lot of abuse there. I'm not familiar with that, and but the transcript is not about the abuse of the authority towards the students in the school, but about the peer-to-peer abuse, and it's something very shocking, you can imagine, and I spot that there's some tension between that group of researchers and teachers, because somehow the students and the teachers start this project, and then I think to one stage the theater people come to help them to shape the piece, and then it seems that there's one point that the teacher said that well, I don't need this kind of theater treatment, so get lost with the theater script and okay, I just want the message. I just want to get the message across. So don't mess around with this message. It seems there's a bit of tension there, and I imagine there will be also cases like this whenever we do a ethno theater or ethno drama.
You said something called "get your message across," and what came to my mind was to who. Because a lot of what we do with this kind of theater also depends on our audiences. Like, for example, there was a series of monologues developed by a theater person who worked with health science people about women with HIV. And the monologues that were written were very much rooted in the interviews that they did with these women, but they were crafted very well. But their primary audience was nurses, doctors, people with HIV. It wasn't meant to be a general theater audience. And so the play that they did have a little bit of, scientific knowledge, a little bit of health-related knowledge, but that was because the audience knew that language. It was taught, it was created to teach people about what it is like to live with HIV. Now, if you took those same pieces and did them for a general audience, no healthcare workers, you would have to do a little bit of trimming and a little bit of editing, because some of the health science information in that play wouldn't really be of interest to a general audience. They just want to know what the stories are, we're trying to get our message across, you always need to consider for who is the audience. You know?
Okay. So that we talk about the audience, and sometimes when I did my own works, and sometimes the audience will have questions that, oh, you because in their mind, the documentary theatre, first of all, documentary theatre is very new in Hong Kong. And in their mind, they will compare it to documentary films and or documentary TV programs. And they will think that because documentary films and documentary TV programs, they find it real, they will not challenge its authenticity. But when they watch my productions, how can you justify that you are doing something real? That's the first question I always face. The second question is, why don't I just watch if you just interview the people, why don't you just record it in film and I will just watch documentary film and documentary TV, and why should I watch an actor impersonating an interviewees instead of watching the interviewees directly? How will you answer to these two questions?
Let me do the live theater one first as opposed to the documentary film. Whenever I watch film or TV, there's a distance between me and the artwork. I can't see anything change because it's on digital video, and so it's always going to be the same. However, when I'm watching live theater, there is an immediate kind of connection between me as an audience member and real people on stage doing work in front of me. That almost heightens the reality of it. Even though it's an actor who is saying what somebody else said, there's still a bit of reality that makes me think, wow, this is really happening in front of me. The other thing you were talking about was, I think, persuasion, where they maybe said, how do I know this is real? Or whenever we do this kind of work, that's one of the goals that we have, is to persuade our audiences that what you're seeing on stage really happened, that what you're seeing and hearing was really said by real people. Now, we can say that in the introduction of the play. We can put that in the program of the play script, here that talks about the play for the audiences. But there has to be some sense of believability with what we see in the performance. If I feel that everything that is being told to me feels true, then I will believe it. I will be persuaded that what I'm seeing is a recreation of life. But if the actors aren't very good at their delivery, or if the play script is perhaps maybe a little bit too heavy-handed, I won't believe it. So it falls on us as theater artists to make the most believable work possible.
But you also said as an artist, when you treat all the materials, we've got to edit things, we've got to put some of this artistic treatment on that. But sometimes people will challenge, of course I don't agree with that, but people will challenge me that how can you guarantee what you present, your presentation is the whole truth? For example, like I've know Laramie Project, some people will challenge that because Laramie Project sort of portray Laramie as a town laden with hidden hidden discrimination. And so I've read that some people in Laramie were not happy about that because they thought it's not the complete truth. So how will you answer to that?
Did you ever see or read the play, The Laramie Project, 10 years later?
Yes. I've translated and put on stage.
Okay. The 10 years later play was, for me, not as interesting as the Laramie Project, but I found it to be more truthful for some reason, because there was actually interviews with the people who did the murder, right? You see people reacting to the first play. One of them, I remember one of the townspeople said, "We are not a project, we are a community." And that line has always stayed with me because it is something that I feel, yes, somebody actually felt that and thought that. When a powerful line like that stays with you, I think it's because it's made a profound insight in some way. It has captured truth in some way. And when I remember lines like that just make me go, that I know is the success of believability, of capturing truth on stage. So that's just as I said, you know, a good ethno theater has just got to be good theater, period, you know?
So it doesn't matter at all whether it's a 100% truth or the complete picture of the truth. It doesn't matter anymore.
No, I think there is a line by a theater artist. His name is Travis Rust. And he said, theater doesn't deal with the facts. Theater deals with the truth, which is different. And I thought that was very wise because a documentary film gives me facts, but documentary theater, live theater, gives me truth, you know?
Well, that's the line I will remember. Thank you for that. And coming back to the status here in the United States, it's maybe because I was in the other part of the world. I knew the important pieces like Laramie Project, like The Exonerate, and I know that Anna Difford Smith is still working on her works, but it seems that in these past 10 years in the professional theater world, there's no more pieces like Laramie Project or The Exonerate coming out. So is it like documentary theater is already out of trend, or I don't know? Can you say?
It's kind of hard to keep up with what's been going on, even for theater people to keep up with what's going on in this country. The most recent professional ethnodrama that I can remember is Holland Taylor's play Anne, which is based on the life of Ann Richards, who was the governor of Texas for 4 years. Holland Taylor interviewed people who knew Ann Richards. She read a lot of the documents and news stories about her. She watched videotapes of her, and she put together a one-woman show about her life. And so that for me was the most recent professional production going on. There are currently some productions going on. They're not as successful as the Laramie Project. Maybe they last for just a couple of weeks and then they're gone. There was a play recently about a woman who actually learned that her husband was someone who was into child pornography. And she, of course, had a very difficult time, you know, trying to deal with that. She put that story, her real story, on stage. That's a very difficult story to tell people, but she was an actress and she put that story on stage. It didn't really get the same kind of popular press like the Laramie Project did. It was there, and now it's gone. Now, I have found a lot of written scripts that are ethnodramatic. They haven't been done on Broadway, but they've been done in like smaller theaters, and they're really excellent scripts. There's one that I just read called The Gun Show. It's by a female playwright. You know that we have a big problem in this country with guns, right? And with the gun violence, this playwright actually lost somebody. to gun violence. And so she put the story how she was raised, in a country, in a home where she learned how to shoot. She learned how to, work with guns because that was part of hunting. That was part of her culture growing up. But then, as she went on with life, she got involved with a young man, and that young man got killed. It was a very tragic story for her, but something important that she needed to put on stage. So she wrote a play about it. It's a wonderful play, The Gun Show, but it's never been done on Broadway. It hasn't been, produced for TV. I don't know if it ever will, but it's an excellent script. So you kind of have to sometimes depend on luck to find these hidden treasures. Sometimes you hear about them in the news, like Anne, but it all depends on just keeping your eyes and your ears open for what's being published, what's being done around the country in professional theater and regional theater, because it doesn't always make big news like the Laramie Project,
Another question, sometimes another challenge I sometimes face. People will think that, for example, like the gun show, I believe the attitudes towards guns or gun control here in the United States are quite polarized. And sometimes people, but I imagine the show is against gun ownership, right? And I think the people who come to watch the show will more or less against or sympathetic with this attitude. So some people will challenge me that, you are always preaching to the converted. Yeah. And so because I try to be informative, but the people who watch my show may already know this incident or already know these attitudes or these standpoints. And you are just preaching to the converted. So how we answer that question?
It's interesting because I've never seen the gun show in performance. I have a feeling that maybe those people who come to theater would be those who appreciate theater, and so they're most likely, not always, but they're most likely to be against guns and for gun control. So they will probably connect with the piece quite a lot. But I would hope that the people who do this show would also promote to gun owners that you need to come see this show to learn about the different perspectives, because here's something really interesting about this play. It was written by a woman, but the stage directions say she wants her story to be told by a man, because she feels people will listen to a man more than they will a woman. And so that's her approach to this particular play, her story, but she wants it told by a man. Isn't that something? Yeah. So.
Yeah, but and another question that comes to my mind is, documentary theater or ethno theater, ethno drama is so cultural specific. And for example, like the show, like I think it's a pretty weird example of Laramie Project, as of some place like Laramie Project that can be translated and transposed to many different countries. Most of the time, for example, I imagine that gun show won't get across to other countries, but yeah. So is it a disadvantage, or is it a disadvantage of ethno theater, ethno drama, or it is something that we should not be care about?
Yeah, that's kind of hard, but then the way I see it is that the Laramie Project touches, I think, on universal themes. It touches on hate. It touches on death. It teaches on everyday people. And those are things that a lot of people around the world hopefully can connect with. But if I were to do the ethno drama Anne about the governor of Texas, all I can do is hope that when I do this show, I know it will appeal to women, I know it will especially appeal to people in Texas. But if I try to do it outside of this country, I don't think people will really understand the culture of this particular woman governing a state like Texas. So I've kind of limited my appeal. Also, ethno theater productions that get published aren't produced all that often, like a regular play is. Like, for example, the play Irma Bombeck at Wit's End. This is about an American female humorist writer. Her writings from a couple of decades back were very popular. So if people were to do the play today, people might go to this because, oh yes, I remember Irma Bombeck, she's very funny. So they'll go to that show because they know the name and they know the person in this country. I don't think they'll know it outside the United States. So in a way, I've got a bigger audience, but only limited perhaps maybe to North America. So sometimes ethno theater productions don't always get produced once they get published, very often. Laramie Project is an exception, right? It gets translated a lot. Very other few ethno dramas will get translated, you know.
And what sort of, well, that's last questions. I know theater or ethno theater or research-based theater or ethno drama has been used more and more often in the academic context. Is it the case? How's the situation like in America? Because in Hong Kong, I think it's still very separate, the academic side and the theater side, and people won't imagine that the academic data can be used in a theatrical context. But how's the situation here?
There are several ethno dramas that are research-based, that are written by scholars, either theater or non-theater, that are published in academic journals. They're not always good, you know, but they're published. And I think that says something, but it's really for a limited readership. And in fact, some people who write these plays never produce them. They're just written. They're never put on stage. And I always say, well, the true test of a play is when you have it at least read, at least put it on stage and see how it works on stage. But only theater people tend to do that and know that. When we see it in the commercial theater on Broadway, maybe it's only going to be maybe once every 5 to 7 years that a new play will come out in ethno theater or ethno drama that really takes hold and catches, you know, the news. But it's not going to be that often, you know, at least right now. But it's there, you know, lots of scripts are in print for production companies to read, to produce. So there's a very healthy body of printed literature out there in ethno drama. Ethno theater, it all depends on whether the production company, people like you, whether they have a strong interest in it, they want to pursue it, then yeah, they'll do it.
Thank you. And I think just the last question. So, can you, so the whole point of doing ethno theater, or what's the advantage of doing ethno theater, ethno drama? What's the point?
When I think about why I do it, I've always been attracted to realism and reality in theater. I love plays that are real. And so maybe I'm transferring my love of realism to what I do with ethno theater, because that's rooted in reality and real life. Maybe that's why I'm drawn to that particular form of theater. It's just one form of theater. I think we need all kinds. Sometimes I want to go see a musical comedy. Sometimes I want to go see a Shakespeare play. Sometimes I want to go see ethno theater because the subject is of importance to me. So I think that it's part of all drama that we have. It's just one kind of play, but I think it's a play that we need to make sure that we always have in our repertoire.
Thank you very much, Johnny. Thank you.
I'm so honored to be invited to be interviewed.